It's kind of a known fact that Godzilla has had a crap ton of games that have been released over the years. And unfortunately, the gaming media hasn't really been too nice to the giant lizard when it comes to his video games. But a lot of fans, like myself, we give a little bit more leniency towards Godzilla and his games. For instance, a lot of us, including myself, are big fans and have a lot of fondness for like Godzilla Monsters of Monsters on NES, or Godzilla Generations, or even more recently, the Godzilla game that came out on PS3 and PS4. Yet some people always ask, has there ever been a Godzilla game that has truly been up there with the best of the best? Well, actually, yes there has. Today I'm going to be looking at a trilogy that defined a generation and made many childhood memories for a lot of G fans. I am of course talking about the one, the only, Godzilla Atari Pipeworks trilogy. I am so very excited to be delving into these games. The games were developed by Pipeworks Software and published by Atari. These games came out around the time of 2002 to 2007. These games have been regarded and praised as the best Godzilla games ever, hands down. No other games have even come close to the level of quality that these have been. Let's take a deep dive and look at these games and see why they left such an impact on us G fans and the gaming industry as a whole. But before I begin, I'd like to give a massive shout out to Wikizilla, because without him, I wouldn't have been able to write this script. He allowed me to use his articles to grab the information that I needed to write this video. Go and support his site. It is a fountain of Godzilla knowledge. I also want to give a massive shout out to Super Godzilla Gaming, as I use a lot of footage from his channel. He has a lot of super high-def footage of these games, and I unfortunately don't have the equipment to record every one of these games in such a good quality. Go subscribe to him, guys, he's awesome. He posts a lot of Godzilla gaming related content. So without Wikizilla and Super Godzilla Gaming, this video would not be as informative nor entertaining to watch. And one more thing, I'll be splitting this retrospective into 3 parts, because this script actually was a lot bigger than I thought. So with all that out of the way, let's get into the Godzilla Atari Pipeworks trilogy retrospective. Let's start from the beginning. Here we have the very first game in the series, and my personal favorite. This was the first Godzilla game I ever played, so I may be a tad biased on here. But this game is just so damn good. Get it? Damn? Anyways, I played this game way back on the GameCube when it first came out. I was a wee little lad in elementary. I remember saving up and going to my local EB Games store. Do you remember when GameStop used to be called EB Games? And I remember going up there and saving my pennies, and I remember going in there and grabbing the game and bringing it home. Oh, it was such a great time. I had a ton of fun with the game. Then later the game was released on Xbox, and I got it later on there. And it blew my mind with the extra content, with some more levels and Kiryu. And the graphics were just way better than the GameCube. What a way to start off a trilogy.
Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee is a fighting game developed by Pipeworks and published by Atari for the GameCube and Xbox. The GameCube version was released on October 8th, 2002 in North America, November 15th, 2002 in the PAL region, and December 12th, 2002 in Japan. On April 16th, 2003, the Xbox version was released exclusively in North America.
The story mode isn't the most in-depth, and nor does it really get you immersed into the world of the game. But I do love the cheesiness and campiness of the cutscenes. It makes you feel like you're watching a Godzilla movie.
The plot begins when the Vortak transmit a signal to Earth stating that they seize possession of all Earth's most powerful creatures. They demand that the Earth submit, demonstrating their strength by attacking numerous towns throughout the world with monsters. However, one monster breaks free from the Vortak's mental control, fleeing Monster Island and fighting with the other monsters. After killing them all, the Vortak transport it to their mothership to be killed by their most powerful weapon, Mechagodzilla. After victory, the monster is transported back to Earth and the Vortak flee, threatening to return one day.
Since this was the first game in the series, the developers didn't have a lot of choice in who they could pick for the roster, mostly thanks to Toho being stingy with the selection of kaiju they could choose. Even so, the roster is really not that bad to start off with. The only thing that held this game back with the character roster is that some characters are cloned characters. They're just reskinned, like Godzilla 90s and 2000, and King Ghidorah and Mecha King Ghidorah. They have the same moveset, but technically different characters.
Godzilla Destroy Monsters Melee has a total of 12 playable monsters, 3 of which are available right away, and the 9 which must be unlocked by regularly playing through adventure mode. It has you start out with Godzilla 90s, Anguirus, and Megalon. Then you go on to unlock Destroya, Gigan, Godzilla 2000, King Ghidorah, Mecha King Ghidorah, Mecha Godzilla 2, Kiryu for the Xbox version, Orga, and Rodan. There are some other monsters that are featured in the game but are not playable. Hedorah appears at random. When Hedorah flies above a monster, its energy regeneration slows. If it is struck by a beam, he will flee the scene. The Purple Mothra Airstrike power-up can be used to summon Mothra. She uses her antenna beams to strike opponents of whoever called it. If she's hit by a beam, she flees as well. Mothra eventually becomes a playable character in the sequels. On an interesting note, there were some unused kaiju that were going to be in the game, but were scrapped. Baragon was supposed to be an exclusive monster in the PlayStation 2 version of the game, but he was cancelled along with it. According to developer Simon Strange, Baragon was about 70% completed when he was scrapped, with audio tracks and Baragon's fire breath still present in the game's files. Baragon would later appear in Pipeworks' other Godzilla releases. The original Godzilla was considered for inclusion in the game, but it was never taken seriously. A long-running story said that he was dropped from the game since there were already 2 Godzillas, although this was not the case. This Godzilla does, however, appear in the Wii edition of Godzilla Unleashed. Toho denied Atari's proposal to incorporate Jet Jaguar in the game. Jet Jaguar would go on to appear in the game's sequels. Kiryu was not included in the North American GameCube edition because Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla had not yet been released outside of Japan. Kiryu was omitted from the game's North American GameCube release in favor of the Heisei Mechagodzilla. However, Kiryu replaced the Heisei Mechagodzilla in the Japanese version of the game. He was then later featured in the North American Xbox release of the game as Mechagodzilla 3. Alongside the Heisei Mechagodzilla, who was now known as Mechagodzilla 2, Kiryu would eventually appear in both of the game's sequels. Space Godzilla was not in the game, but he did appear in the sequels.
In my opinion, this game has the best controls hands down. It feels super slick and quick. There isn't much lag between pushing the buttons and seeing the result on screen. Even though you're a giant beast, you don't feel sluggish in this game. I felt though as the series continued on, the controls got a little slower each entry. Still, there's no denying that the controller scheme for this game was done masterfully.
For movement, you control the monster's path with the control stick or D-pad. Because your monster immediately faces the nearest monster opponent, all movement is in relation to the location of your opponent. Using the left trigger, this makes your monster duck. High attacks miss your head as you duck. The run button is essential for reaching somewhere quickly, as it causes your monster to travel regardless of where your enemy is. While running, you can't grab anything or utilize energy weapons. The right trigger makes your monster jump or fly. To jump, press and release or hold fly if the monster can fly. This can be used to easily hop over barriers. In terms of defense, all monsters have 300 hit points to start, and most hits deal 5 to 30 points of damage. You can't have a fighting game without blocking your opponent. You block by pressing the Y button or Y and left trigger at the same time. Regular blocking and duck blocking are the 2 types of blocking. Regular blocks negates any physical attacks that does not land on your feet. You are free to move around while blocking. Low attacks are countered by duck blocking. While blocking, you can be grabbed. Head level attacks can be deflected by crouching. You can also hide behind buildings by crouching. Interruption is another defense strategy. If your opponent is carrying a building or charging a beam attack, you can swiftly fire your beam attack at him. Running away is also often the best option. No beam weapon stretches across the entire screen, and you might hop away from a building's trajectory to avoid it. When attacked, knockback is triggered in addition to damage. Light, stagger, knockdown, super knockdown, and null are 5 forms of knockback, as well as the state effect stun. Light knockback only has a minor and temporary effect on you. It is triggered by weak attacks or strikes that you just slightly withstand. Light attacks have no knockback when the opponent is flying or performing a finishing move. The stagger knockback knocks you back a few feet, but you remain upright. Stagger attacks usually become knockdown assaults while in rage. Knockdown hits knock you on the ground, and you must lie down for a few moments before getting back up. Knockdown assaults usually become super knockdown attacks while in rage. Super knockdown launches you into the air and sends you flying hundreds of meters away. It only occurs when you are hit by a rage assault or a strong strike, which you are extremely vulnerable to. Null occurs when you are hit by a weak assault to which you are extremely resistant, resulting in very little damage and no reaction. Stun refers to any attack that renders a monster unable to attack for an extended period. Freeze tanks, Megalon's napalm, Mecha King Ghidorah's tasers, Orga's paralyzing goo, or having your foot smashed by a low strike can cause it. Monsters can become fatigued after carrying an opponent for an extended period, while Megalon can become tired after failing to snag someone with the burrow attack. You can't have defense without offense. All monsters have your main physical attacks. You can punch, kick, use a monster's unique fierce attack, and a rage attack. This can launch a devastating strike that impacts a spherical area around you. Using it removes you from the fury state. Each monster has a medium to long-range energy-based attack in the form of a beam or breath weapon. These attacks use energy, but their range and variety frequency surpasses the cost, making them essential components of any fighter's strategy. The beam usually targets the nearest adversary, although you may change the aim using the C-stick and auto-aim the airborne adversaries by holding the R button. Most monsters also have a powerful secondary fire that can be activated by tapping the Z button. It's worth noting you can't move or block while charging or launching a beam. Monsters can perform air attacks by pressing the X or A buttons when in the air because of jumping. By pressing Z, flying monsters can use their beam weapons in the air as well. Some monsters can use their tails or other weapons to attack adversaries who are immediately behind them. When knocked down on the ground, monsters can use the control stick or D-pad to roll about in a single direction, and or conduct get-up attacks with B or X buttons. Each one targets the three areas: the head, feet, or body. Regular blocking cancels out head and body assaults, whereas duck blocking cancels out body and foot attacks. Overhead attacks can land in any of the three zones, whereas uppercuts can land either in the head or body. Damage is classified into three types: blunt strikes, which produce a blue flash when they're connected, edged assaults, which produce a yellow flash, and energy-based attacks, which produce no flash effect. Some creatures are more vulnerable to one type of assault than another. Super knockdown and blocked attacks are represented by red and white flashes, respectively.
So not only does this game have a deep combat system, what I think made this game unique as well is the fact that there are power-ups in this game. This gave the fighting a unique edge to it.
Power-ups fall from the silver UFO that hovers above the battlefield every now and again. A bright Atari logo can be found hiding in a structure on occasion, only in the medium or hard difficulty setting though. Collecting the symbol allows you to access one item in the gallery mode. This power-up has the appearance of a yellow lightning bolt. It entirely replenishes your energy bar and causes it to refill 4 times faster for 25 seconds after you pick it up, though only for beam weapons. Energy lost to special moves such as flying still recharge at the same rate. This power-up has the appearance of a bright green cross and restores 45 hit points. For 25 seconds, this multicolored power-up enrages your monster. Enraged monsters deal 20% more damage and are more likely to knock an opponent down. They can also use their rage attack. It should be noted, however, that being frozen by a freeze tank causes you to exit rage early.
The game had a plethora of modes for you to choose from and get invested into. As the series would continue, they would expand on these modes for even more content. But for the first outing, really wasn't that bad.
In Adventure Mode, you defeat the Vortak by fighting your way through the story. This acts as the traditional arcade ladder. Destruction Mode is, well, what you expect. Destroy as much as you can. Whoever has the most points at the end of the game wins. Also, you can pick up and hurl buildings out of the area to get a couple more points. Destruction Mode is only accessible in multiplayer form in the GameCube version, but it is playable in the single-player mode on the Xbox. The Gallery Mode lets you examine the gallery items you earn by collecting Atari power-ups while playing the adventure game on normal or hard difficulty. Melee Mode is your multiplayer match. Fights can be fought by up to 4 players. Survival is the traditional fight until you're defeated by other monsters. Between matches, your health is only minimally regenerated, and you have time restrictions to vanquish the monster before you lose. In a team battle mode, a melee in which up to 4 players fight in teams of 3. In Versus, you can do a one-on-one battle between 2 players or between 1 player and a computer.
Now, you can't have a fighting game without some cool arenas to fight in. Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee consists of a lot of really cool arenas to fight in.
So in the game, you have the Boxing Arena, London, Los Angeles, Monster Island, Osaka, San Francisco, Seattle, Tokyo, and the Vortac Homeworld, and the Vortac Mothership. And some of these maps have different areas like North San Francisco and East San Francisco. The game, believe it or not, also featured some DLC content. This was only available for the Xbox version, however. For the Xbox version of the game, a DLC arena called Thrashburg was momentarily available for download through Xbox Live. However, because the original Xbox Live has now been decommissioned, there is no longer a means to obtain this map. One last amazing thing about the arenas is how each map has a day and night version.
Another great aspect of this game is its soundtrack. The music was composed by Jake Kaufman. I'll admit, the music isn't the best in the trilogy, but it does have good beats and it gets you really into the action. It fits the presentation of the game. A few of my favorite tracks are as follows. One of the last things I love about this game is the fact that it has cheat codes. You just don't get these fun kind of cheats anymore in video games, let alone fighting games.
To enter cheat codes, press and hold the L, B, and R buttons in that order, then release them in the B, R, L order. You use the D-pad to select the numbers and A to advance the next number. The following are a list of cheat codes. In the game, you get a black and white mode, you can play the game in Technicolor mode, you get 12 continues in adventure mode, you can pick a cheat code that makes monsters small, and you can also have invincibility, as well as 4 times the damage. You get a cheat that all buildings and objects become throwable. There's a cheat where all buildings become indestructible. There's a cheat where monsters are invisible. And there's also a cheat where everyone can be enraged for an unlimited amount of time. You can also turn the military on and off. And you can also have super energy where they have a limited amount of energy. Then you have cheats where you don't have any of the power-ups and no freeze tanks. And then there's also cheat codes to unlock everything. So for some fun trivia, this game was initially a GameCube exclusive. However, it was eventually ported to the Xbox, as we know. Backwards compatibility, though, allows the Xbox version to be played on the Xbox 360. The Heisei Mechagodzilla is portrayed as the only form of Mechagodzilla in the North American GameCube version of the game. Despite his powers and position in the table being more similar to Showa Mechagodzilla, the Heisei Mechagodzilla was replaced in the Japanese version of the game by Kiryu, the new Mechagodzilla from the newly released Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. The Heisei Mechagodzilla and Kiryu were later included in the North American Xbox release and were given the names Mechagodzilla 2 and Mechagodzilla 3. Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee was the first Godzilla video game to support 4 players. The Japanese GameCube version was built on top of the North American original. As a result, you may get the English version from a Japanese disc by using a region swap disc, such as Freeloader, or by patching the region code. However, this implies that the Japanese-only content, such as Mechagodzilla 3, will be inaccessible.
So as you can see, Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee came out swinging for a Godzilla game. All the aspects of this game are perfect in my opinion. And with a few more tweaks, we would get a sequel that would improve and expand on everything that this game started. But before we get to Save the Earth, we have to take a little pit stop and talk about the portable spin-off, Godzilla Domination. In the same year as Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee came out, we got Godzilla Domination on the GBA. It was developed by WayForward Technologies and still published by Atari. This was a little fun tie-in game compared to its bigger brother on the consoles, but to this day I still enjoy it from time to time. In terms of a plot, it's just as silly as any other Godzilla plot can be.
The story is as follows. Meteor X hovers over Tokyo and begins to project magnetic waves, inflicting neurological damage to some monsters and leading them to go insane. The monsters launch an attack on Earth and its satellite planets led by Mecha King Ghidorah. One creature, however, is untouched by the waves, and it's up to them to halt the other monsters and destroy Meteor X.
The gameplay is something that was completely overhauled compared to the console version. Instead of trying to squeeze everything that the console version did into a portable, they decided to give it more of a 2D beat-em-up style game.
The 8-level story mode concludes with a battle against a colossal Mecha King Ghidorah. You can play against up to 3 computer-controlled opponents in custom mode. The player has control over the monsters, arena, difficulty level, and teams. Versus mode allows 2 to 4 people to compete against each other using the Game Boy Advance game Link cable. The single pack option allows for multiplayer battles with a single Godzilla Domination cartridge, although players can only utilize Godzilla. There are 6 distinct monsters to choose from. Each character has a speed, power, and special rating. There are 7 arenas to choose from: Tokyo 2, Glacier, which has 2 variants, Nova, which has 2 variants as well, Meteor Z, and Moonbase. The Moonbase is renowned for its low gravity, which allows monsters to jump much higher.
Obviously, this is a smaller in scope game. The roster of characters is drastically reduced. And I'll say that most of the characters do feel a bit samey in this game, but that's not a huge issue, especially considering the hardware limitations.
The game features 6 playable characters. Mecha King Ghidorah is not a playable character, and in the Japanese version of the game, Mechagodzilla 2 is replaced with Kiryu, but has the same abilities. Interestingly enough, there are a lot of regional differences between versions. Rather than reusing the box art from Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee, the Japanese box art has a fresh artwork depicting the game's cast of kaiju rendered in a super deformed or chibi manner. The box image notably shows Godzilla, Mothra, and Kiryu, with other monsters in the background, as the game was published around the same time as Godzilla Tokyo SOS in Japan. A special edition of the game was released that featured semi-transparent replicas of Bandai's Kaiju-O Kuboru sets, Godzilla, Mothra, and Kiryu figure puppets. The Japanese version of Godzilla is based on his design from Godzilla Tokyo SOS, with gray skin and a big scar on his chest, rather than being the bright green color used in the American version. For the Japanese version of Godzilla Tokyo SOS, it was decided to replace the Heisei Mechagodzilla with the Millennium version of the character, Kiryu, in order to capitalize on the approaching release of Godzilla Tokyo SOS. Kiryu is based on his modified Type 3 Kiryu design, and even has the drill hand from that version. Mothra's look is more closely modeled after her design in Godzilla Tokyo SOS, similar to what was done with Godzilla and Mechagodzilla, whereas Mothra's appearance in the US version is somewhat modeled after her 2001 design. Mothra's wings have been modified from white to pale earthly green. For her in-game artwork, Mothra's eyes shift hue from deep purple to light blue, more appropriately reflecting her film's appearance, albeit they remain purple on her sprite. In addition, her poison powder assault has been modified from a vivid purple to a soft earthy blue in the Japanese version. The Japanese story mode offers 3 modes of play: Default, Survival, and Rage, and is considered the most exciting update in the game. The purpose of Survival is to put one's endurance and lifespan to the test in warfare. The player is stripped of continues and cannot refill their health. Each monster's wrath meter fills up quickly in Rage, allowing them to use their special powers repeatedly and in fast succession. This offers players who use Rodan and Megalon a huge edge, as the attacks they can unleash with the full Fury meter are by far the most powerful in the game. The sequence of fight configuration in the Japanese edition was juggled quite a bit. The second stage is a 1-on-1 match, rather than a 2-on-2 match. The third stage is a 2-on-2 match, rather than a 1-on-1 match. The fourth stage is a 3-monster free-for-all, rather than a 2-on-2. The fifth stage is a 4-monster free-for-all, rather than a 1-on-3. The sixth stage is a 1-on-3 match, instead of 4-monster free-for-all. Furthermore, the additional stages from the American edition have been eliminated, substantially shortening the time it takes to reach Mecha King Ghidorah. And enemy/ally monsters in the Japanese version are fully chosen at random.
The game's controls are also a lot more simplified. This due again to hardware limitations. Still, the game plays really well, and once you get a handle on how the game controls and plays, you can dominate the enemy.
The game has basic attacks consisting of high and low. There are also aerial moves that can be performed. Each character has a special move that can be performed by holding A or B until the character is flashing. When you release the button, you release your special. Rage attacks are also in the game as well. Each monster has an attack that consumes 1, 2, or 3 rage bars, respectively. There is no link between button combinations and the number of bars used in an attack. Megalon's LNR strike, for example, depletes his full fury meter, but Godzilla requires only 1 bar.
The soundtrack to the game was still composed by Jake Kaufman, and this soundtrack is amazing. I wish there was a non-compressed version of these tracks, because man, these tracks are just so fire. And they're very tonally different from the console version. These have a more techno-ish, faster beat to them. A few of my favorite tracks are as follows. Before we end, we also have some interesting trivia. Thanks once again to Wikizilla for this.
With the exception of Megalon, all of Toho's big 5 kaiju are playable in Godzilla Domination: Godzilla, Rodan, Mothra, King Ghidorah, and Mechagodzilla. The cover art for the game is identical to that of Godzilla Destroy Monsters Melee in the United States. The European cover art for this game also reuses the European box art for Godzilla Destroy Monsters Melee, which includes images of Gigan and Anguirus, both of whom are absent from Godzilla Domination. In this game, Rodan has the capacity to spit a cloud of deadly gas from his mouth, which he has never displayed before or since. Jake Kaufman, a well-known video game composer who worked on DuckTales Remastered, the Shantae series, Red Faction Guerrilla, Contra 4, and Shovel Knight, provided the game's soundtrack.
Godzilla Domination is a very good experience for a handheld console. It's not the best overall, but for what it is, it's a good time. So that's it for the first part, guys. Godzilla Destroy Monsters Melee and Domination would be the first step into Godzilla getting into really top-notch gaming here, and proving that the King of the Monsters can have a quality video game. And how would the devs improve from here? Well, getting ready for the 50th anniversary of Godzilla at the time, the devs had their work cut out for them. How would they fare? Tune into part 2 and let's find out when we move to the highly regarded Godzilla Save the Earth. I'll see you in part 2, guys. Thanks for watching.